Hello there, and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman. That spiky fellow over there is my buddy Tyrone. How you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm feeling a little nerdy today.
That is very good because our episode today is going to be the second in our installment covering this new book, relatively new, Economics in Three Lessons. It looks like this. Um, a a reprisal of Henry Hazlitt's famous Economics in One lesson. This new one is by Hunter Lewis, who has written a bunch of interesting books. So we are going through this book bit by bit, piece by piece, and breaking it down and giving our commentary, teaching you economics and other stuff.
Yeah. The previous episode in this playlist, we started with the first lesson, and that was just a nice, short one chapter lesson on the topic of sustainability, what that means from an economic perspective, right? So now we're moving on to lesson two, but we're going to break this lesson up into 3 episodes. Because it's a bit of a longer section in the book. It's multiple chapters. So we're going to tackle a couple of chapters at a time. So today we're going to do lesson 2, and from the book that's chapters 2 and 3. And as I mentioned, lesson 1 was titled Sustainability. Lesson 2 is titled The Free Price System. All right. So chapter 2. And if you hadn't watched the first video, folks, highly recommend you go back because, these lessons build on top of each other. But the way we're doing this is I'm literally just going to read from the book, pause every once in a while, and we'll fill in with some commentary and feedback, maybe clarify things. I mean, sometimes a lot of this stuff is written in, older language, ways of speaking. So, Adam might reinterpret some of this stuff for you because he's the big brain on the show.
Plus, I'm old.
I'm the handsome idiot. So.
Plus, I'm old. I know old stuff.
All right. So, chapter 2, the central role played by free prices, and he starts the chapter with a quote from Austin Dahl. Soviet socialism collapsed because it did not tell the economic truth. Ooh. All right. Well, why is the human race so poor? That is a good question. Why do billions still lack enough even to eat? As this author noted in an earlier book, even a small sum of money, such as $10, if compounded at 3% over 1,000 years, would produce a sum equal to twice the world's wealth today. It should be ridiculously easy over time to end human poverty. Why have we failed to do so? Failure to cooperate, to work together is the obvious answer. There is very little each of us can do alone, but there is endless opportunity in organizing ourselves to work constructively together in an ever-broadening circle. Like children, we refuse to do what is clearly in our long-term interest to do. We either think only of the short term or sacrifice the common and greater good for the immediate benefit of our particular group. Moreover, we cover up and lie about what we are doing. Lie both to ourselves and others. So that first part there, Adam, seems to be kind of just a statement, observation of basic human nature itself. You have any additional thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, he glosses over it kind of quickly in this chapter. I'm not sure if he's exactly done doing that in just these first 2 paragraphs, but he's really talking about if humans want to prosper, we have to cooperate and get beyond the high time preference that is our basic brutish nature when we're all starving and rooting around in the dirt for grubs and rotten fruit or whatever. And so we're talking about, economics is the study of how you get from that barbaric situation to human cooperation and prosperity. And free prices have a lot to do with that. And how do you get those? You adhere to some basic tenets of civilization, such as free association, private property rights, rule of law, contracts, stopping theft and violence and all that horrible stuff. And I really love that he's emphasizing again the time preference thing as being the bedrock of civilization. He's exactly right.
All right. So Hunter Lewis continues on in the chapter. How can we do better? First of all, we must be assured of our physical safety and the safety of our property. How can we consider the long term if our life and property are at risk at any moment from human predators, whether criminal or sanctioned by the government? It is difficult to consider the long term if everything we have can be stolen at any moment. But safety and protection from theft is not enough either. In addition, we need an honest system of mutual exchange that everyone can rely on. A corrupt and dishonest economic system does not create wealth, it destroys it. And we talk a lot about that on the show, right? That this fake fiat monetary system that we have corrupts society, corrupts your soul, corrupts everything it touches until eventually, it's just going to destroy society. It's going to decay it.
Interestingly, I mean, we're talking about the essential nature of free prices. And with the fiat money system, you don't have a true price of money because it's created arbitrarily at a whim. And since money is, one half of every transaction, mostly, it's the denominator of every price, then we don't have accurate free prices. With a fiat money system, it's not as bad as the opening quote of this chapter says, in the Soviet Union, where you have nothing like an accurate price. Our prices are better than that, but they're still not true. They're not proper.
And that's really, really key, what you said right at the beginning, the price of money. So I think this is a point we should almost hammer home on every episode of the podcast. This is so fundamental because I think a lot of people think of usury laws, right? And they think of interest as like somehow evil. The bank is charging you interest on a loan. It just seems like you can never get out of it. But what interest really is, it's the price of money. It's the cost of money. That's what the interest function is telling you. And so what Adam just said there is we don't have a true price of money or true cost of money. It's because the federal government through the Federal Reserve is setting that price. They set the interest rates, right? So it's not natural. It's an artificial price. We don't have an honest, true price of money. And that is the root of everything. If you don't have a true price of money, you can't have a true price of anything else. So, all right. It continues on. The most reliable barometer of economic honesty is to be found in prices. Honest prices, neither manipulated nor controlled, provide both investors and consumers with reliable economic signals. They show beyond any doubt what is scarce, what is plentiful, where opportunities lie, and where they do not lie. A corrupt economic system does not want honest prices, honest information, or honest results. The truth may be inconvenient or unprofitable for powerful government leaders or private interests allied with them. Typically, throughout human history, these leaders and special interests have sought to use their power to manipulate and control prices to their own advantage. Much of the time, powerful price manipulators and controllers are accompanied and assisted by ideologists or theoreticians, special pleaders for hire, as described by Hazlitt. These professional advisors, skilled verbally or in mathematics, confidently argue that dishonest prices are really honest. Honest prices are really dishonest. The resulting chaos is really order, and a future filled with jobs and plenty lies ahead with just a few more manipulations or controls. Sometimes these arguments are presented with calculated deceit, sometimes with muddled sincerity. Adam?
Yeah, amen and amen. I love the fact that he points to our economic advisors to the political class who would look at the price occurring naturally in a market or as naturally as we can get given government interventions and say no, that's an error. That's a market error, and what we really need to do is come around and correct that with our true proper government price. just just destroying the bottom up decentralized order that you get from a free price system and imposing somebody's arbitrary will. It's good for them. It's not good for the rest of us.
Right. And he doesn't specifically say this because this isn't the whole picture, but when he talks about the private interest allied with the politicians, for shorthand, we could just say these are the special interest groups, right? And I remember reading something, when the founding fathers were debating the Constitution and how to set up the government. I recall there was a vigorous debate whether they were thinking about outlawing special interest groups. They'd write it in that there could be no special interest groups lobbying Congress for anything. And I think they decided that, well, it was going to happen one way or the other.
Exactly.
And if you just outlaw it, it would just be behind the curtain and you would have no visibility at all. So it's better to have it at least out front and visible.
Yeah.
But that's basically what we're talking about here. That when we're talking about the private sector allied with the government, they're working in collusion to set prices.
Yeah, it's a lesson I wish we learned today. Like, you'll hear well-intentioned leftists usually, but not always, say things like, we really need to get money out of politics because it's through the influence of money and campaign contributions and all this that we get these crony people influencing the politicians. Well, they knew that when they wrote the Constitution. Even if you were somehow to, get the visible money out, you can't stop one human being from influencing another one in some way. It'll just be driven underground, and that doesn't. The only way you can minimize this problem is by minimizing the size and scope and power of government. Make it less able to influence your life, and there'll be less reason for a crony to come bribing some politician to get a special favor. Create a system where you're not allowed as a government operator to give anyone special favors. That's not part of our culture. It's not part of our system. That's the only way to. I mean, I'm an anarchist. I don't think we should have a monopoly government because it inherently grows because of these foibles of human nature. But absent that, you've got to try and keep the things small and not bribable, because who would bother? Why would you bother?
Yeah, and what you said there, it's a great one of those great phrases that we can just turn around to show our position very, very clearly. So you said usually from the left, they'll say we need to get money out of politics. Well, what we would say as libertarians, no, it's the opposite. We need to get politics out of money.
Amen.
Right? Okay. All right. So continuing on with the chapter 2 here. Can it really be this simple? That job growth and economic prosperity will follow if we provide a safe environment and allow economic prices to tell the truth, free from the self-dealing and self-interested theories of powerful special interests? That is the central thesis of this lesson, and each chapter will explore it from an additional angle. What is needed to pull humanity out of dire poverty is a free price system, one that is neither manipulated nor controlled. If prices are not free, an economic system cannot be expected to function properly. If prices are not free, an economic system cannot be expected to function properly. What happens thereafter will depend on the degree of price manipulation or control. If it is not extreme, the economy may limp along impaired, not realizing its full potential, but not in overt crisis. If the undermining of free prices is extreme enough, the system will visibly falter and may even collapse, as in 1929 or 2008. In this case, capital, jobs, and people's lives are destroyed. Ironically, the crisis often leads to a government response entailing even more price manipulation or control, which guarantees even more trouble, if not immediately, then down the road. A further irony of all this is that a large majority of professional economists, including those aligned on the political left as well as right, respond to surveys by indicating that they generally oppose government price controls. The problem is that most government price manipulations and controls are not advertised as such. They may be stealthy by design, or they may just take a form that is not easily recognized for what it is. Whatever form they take, they are doing untold damage to the hopes and prospects of anyone who depends on the economy, especially the poor. That's the end of chapter 1. Final thoughts, Adam, on that?
Chapter 2.
Chapter
Yeah.
2 of the second lesson. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, well, the second lesson is all about free prices. And I just want to underscore that free prices are important because they are what you get when you have free people. To the extent that you don't have free prices, it is the freedom of people that is curtailed. And so it's if you find yourself advocating for some kind of government control over prices in one area or another, and you believe in, like human liberty, you have a bit of a contradiction you need to work out. Free people buying and selling in an open market, free of coercion, is how you generate free prices. And they coordinate well. We're about to get to exactly what they do, the amazing thing that free prices do for us. So, yeah, they're important, and it's because free prices are what free people generate.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so then we're going to move on to chapter 3. So that was sort of, he was setting up the premise of the lesson, giving an overview, and now dive into sort of the nitty-gritty details of in the subsequent chapters. So we're just going to go with chapter 3 here, and then we'll end the episode and pick it up the next one. So chapter 3 is titled, What Prices Do for Us. For you and me, what do they do?
You and me. Even porcupines.
Even porcupines. Imagine getting up one morning and discovering that there are no longer any prices. What complete chaos there would be. Chaos that would soon lead to shortages, starvation, and social collapse! Exclamation point. Without any prices, we would be back to a barter system, and the world's present population could not even be fed, housed, or clothed by barter. Prices help us survive and thrive by enormously simplifying economic life. They do not tell us everything, but they tell us enough to make decisions. Let's say that I'm a tomato sauce producer. If the price of tomato sauce is higher than the price of the inputs, such as tomatoes, olive oil, spices, glass jars, labels, processing facilities, etc., I will probably decide to make tomato sauce. I do not know why these prices are what they are. Is it because demand is rising or falling, or is it supply? I do not need to know in order to produce or to consume. Prices lead me and other market participants to act in ways that balance demand and supply, and by doing so, to give people as much as possible of what they want. What happens if the flow of information from prices is interrupted by government price manipulations or controls? If I am unaware of what is happening, I may make poor decisions. If I become aware of what is happening, I may become afraid to make any decisions at all. Either way, my employees may lose their jobs or at least their raises. So let's stop there real quick.
Yeah, great start. Two things. First, I want to point out that he says if we woke up one morning and the prices were all somehow gone, we'd be back in a barter system. Well, that means the very first thing we do is we started to try and improve our situation as trade and establish, in effect, a price, a barter exchange. We need prices to do the most basic things if we want to cooperate as humans. And again, so if somehow the prices just got eliminated, I don't know how. We all forget what they are or whatever. The first thing we do is figure out an exchange for the important things that we need to trade. And then a critical point, as he's getting into here, what prices enable producers and consumers do is to efficiently allocate resources. And it is a miracle that a farmer or a tomato sauce maker, well, how you make tomato sauce, but all you need to do is to know the market demand price for your thing and understand what the prices are of the inputs, and you can calculate whether it makes sense for you to use the precious resources of our world to make tomato sauce or not, or to grow crops or not, and which are the best ways to employ, again, scarce resources to accomplish this. You can economize with prices. It makes you a rational actor, and you don't need to know anything about weather patterns or market demand, or how mining is going in South America. All you need to do is look at the price and see all that critically important information crystallized in one number. Prices really are a miracle when you think about what they convey and how they make rational economic action possible.
Yeah, agreed. During the 18th century, there were frequent bread shortages in France. This is when Queen Marie Antoinette is supposed to have exclaimed when told that the peasants were starving from lack of bread, "Why, let them eat cake." The French government was not much more sensible in dealing with the crisis. It placed price controls on bread since scarcity was driving the price higher. The French government was not much more sensible in dealing with the crisis. It placed price controls on bread since scarcity was driving the price higher. The intention was to make bread more affordable. The cost of growing wheat was also rising, however, so that the wheat farmers realized they would have to sell at a loss. Not surprisingly, they stopped planting, and the price of bread rose even higher. Jacques Turgot, Controller General of France, tried to introduce free price reforms, but government officials and allied business interests, crony capitalists in today's terminology, quickly forced his resignation. This in turn sealed the fate of the regime and eventually cost the monarch his life, as well as that of his wife, Marie Antoinette. In 1770, Turgot wrote that the French monarchy fancied that it ensured abundance of grain by making the condition of the cultivator more uncertain and unhappy than that of all other citizens. End quote. Yep.
Yeah, this is something that people just refuse to get into their thick skulls. Price controls lead to shortages because they restrict supply. And if you wanted to really enforce a price control and keep supply plentiful, you would have to enslave the producers and force them at gunpoint to produce, because otherwise they're going to look at the price that they are legally allowed to sell whatever good it is at and realize they're going to make a loss. So I would rather sit on my couch or go back to the forest and pick apples than, engage in backbreaking labor in order to lose money. So if you're trying to just wish by fiat or force of arms prices to be lower, and so you make a law, all you're doing is restricting the supply of the good in question.
Another example I like to use often, which I think is a little bit simpler and I think maybe a bit easier to grasp in some ways, is to talk about price controls at like a grocery store. So I'm going grocery shopping today after we record, and every time I go to the grocery store, I walk by the deli counter and I look at the delicious T-bone and ribeye steaks, and my mouth starts to water. I'm like, boy, I sure would like one of those. And then I look at the price and say, well, this is $20 a pound for this premium ribeye, or over here I've got, ground beef for, $3 a pound or whatever it is. And I'm like, man, I really want the ribeye, but I can't afford it. So I'm just going to have tacos. Taco night, I guess, right? We're going to have tacos instead. But government comes along and now all of a sudden sets a price control on T-bone steaks, saying, nope, we don't like it that not everybody can afford it. That's not fair. We're going to make it so that all meats are $3 a pound. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is the first people to the store, everybody's going to buy out the T-bone because that's what everybody really wants, right? And then it's all gone. So you have a shortage, right? Because of the price control. So It's another way to think about how price controls create shortages, because there aren't an infinite, there isn't an infinite supply of cows and T-bone steaks, right? There's a certain amount. So what a price does is it limits, it recognizes there's a limit on the supply, and that's the information it's giving to you. It's saying, well, this thing's scarce, so it's worth more. Anyway.
Yeah, and it does two things. It forces the consumers to economize, to really think about whether they need the thing or want the thing. And it also encourages the supplier to make more. Example I usually use is the uh, no price gouging during a hurricane or whatever. When people are worried and they want to stock up on bottles of water or whatever, the do-gooders who like government powers say, well, you need to enforce a price control here. You can't allow these greedy store owners to jack up the price of bottles of water, because otherwise people won't be able to get enough. But it's the exact opposite. If you keep the price low, the first people to get there are going to grab as much as they want. And even if you impose a further government restriction, like limiting it to one case per person or whatever, you've crippled supply, because you've reduced the incentive to do for other people with bottled water in nearby areas. You've reduced their incentive to bring more bottled water, which is exactly what you want to happen in a crisis when more is urgently needed. So the high price encourages people not to just to, if they're the first on the scene, gobble up everything they can get. It encourages them to think twice, which means leaving more for others, and it encourages other people to bring more water. And it's the same with allocating hotel rooms for people who are evacuating and whatnot. If the price isn't allowed to rise, the first people to roll in are just going to grab one room for every person or whatever, even if they don't need to. Maybe a family can bunk up or whatever. But without that high price, they're not even going to think about economizing in that way, which means the hotel rooms get occupied, and the next person to come down finds there's no vacancy at the inn, and they're not all Mary and Joseph. So that's bad.
Governments have imposed outright price controls on goods for thousands of years. King Hammurabi literally carved prices in stone on a monument placed in ancient Babylon about 4,000 years ago. As demand and supply shifted, one can only imagine the havoc caused by these legally mandated, never changing prices. The communist government that followed the Russian Revolution of 1917 faced a particularly troublesome decision about prices. Its leaders knew that they intended to abolish private property and private profits. In that case, what to do about prices? Should they be kept? It seemed unimaginable to abolish prices completely. But with private property and private property transactions outlawed, who would set prices and how would it be done? This was complicated by a curious omission on Karl Marx's part. The founder of communism had never, in all three fat volumes of his work Capital, bothered to explain exactly how his version of socialism would work. There was no blueprint on which to draw, nor even specific instructions about prices or profits. Faced with this quandary, the Soviet planners decided that public officials would set prices and any profits would accrue to the state. British economist John Maynard Keynes praised these efforts. Let us not belittle these magnificent experiments or refuse to learn from them. The 5-year plan in Russia, the corporative states devised by Mussolini in Italy, and state planning under democracy in Great Britain. Let us hope that they will all be successful. My boy, Johnny Maynard. Never saw a government plan he didn't like.
I mean, we're just doing experiments, right? And what could go wrong?
Right. We're
Goes
just
to show you.
experimenting.
Goes to show you what kind of guy Keynes is, that he thinks, central planning, it could be better than for free markets. And I don't know. I was today years old when I learned that the Code of Hammurabi had price controls in it. I didn't know that. I find that kind of amazing. And the quick reference to the Soviet Union there is amazing. Yeah, if the government owns everything, you cannot have the buying and selling of capital goods, which means how do you make production decisions? And
Right.
one of the hilarious things that went on at least part of the time, or in some places in the Soviet Union, is they were using prices from the Sears and Roebuck catalog or something to try and mimic
Right.
Give them some sort of basis for a rational calculation. And of course, it didn't work, but it just goes to show prices are essential to human flourishing. We need them, and we even will take ones that don't make any sense if we don't have real ones.
Right. And the real tragedy of all this is that governments can get away with price controls for a while, right? And as the author noted, that we just previously read, if the price controls aren't too extreme, society gets by, it limps along. It might improve a little bit over time, but it's never reaching its full potential. Like it could be so much better. And if the price controls are extreme, then society can't function at all, and everything collapses. So, but the problem is, they can get away with it for a while. So it's never immediate enough. It's never, it never. It's like, if somebody punches you in the face, you feel it right away. But suppose somebody punched you in the face, and it wasn't until 3 weeks later that you felt the pain. You can imagine how you might go around just saying, "Hey, punch me in the face. It's super fun."
Or say you didn't see the punch and you don't know why your face hurts. I mean, the thing
Yeah.
with these price
Yeah.
controls is they bleed you for a long time, and you can't experience the counterfactual. You
Right.
can't experience the prosperity you would have had absent these things. And as brutal as the Soviet system was, and despite the tens of millions of people that unnecessarily died, it lived along for 70 years. That's a
Right.
long time.
Right.
And some
Generations.
version of Maoist communism is still going on today.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's like a slow, like oil drip out of your car, right?
yeah.
You may not notice it, really. It's a little drip here and there, dripping along as you drive away, or maybe you see, there's a little spot in my in my garage, but it doesn't seem like it's. And the car started and drove fine, and yeah, it works until it just doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it just seizes up and it's done. Your car's totaled or ruined. And that's kind of the way societies collapse, gradually and then suddenly.
Yeah, or maybe like depriving the human body of all the food it needs is a better example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can last for a while, but you're depleting the resources of your body. You're not doing as well as you would on any given day, and you might not know what's going on. You might not understand the reason why you feel sluggish and weak, and you're wasting away. Price controls are like that.
It's like when people point to, oh, look, see, socialism can work. Look at Sweden. They got the free healthcare and they got the this and the that. And it's like, yeah, because in the 40s and 50s, they were capitalists and spent, decades building up reserves. And now you're just spending them all.
And even in those countries, those Scandinavian countries, they have a huge social safety net, but their economic freedom is better than ours. They have less controls on the actual production. It's just that they spend a whole bunch of it in ways that we don't think is very smart, but they know what generates wealth.
All right, so Keynes is a big lover of communism. No surprise there. All right, but then now we get to our guy coming in to swoop in and save the day. Economist Ludwig von Mises sharply disagreed with this. He argued in a 1920 article titled Economic Calculation and the Socialist Commonwealth and a 1922 book, Socialism, that the Soviet system was unworkable. Prices set by government officials could not possibly provide the information needed to make efficient decisions about the allocation of capital and labor. A flourishing modern economy requires billions of such decisions. How could government officials, however expert, know enough or learn enough to make sense of all the masses of price interrelationships or even be able to define them? Journalist John Gunther, author of Inside USA in 1946, wrote that, quote, "It goes without saying that some degree of government intervention and control in economic life has become a necessity because of the enormously increased complexity of the modern world," unquote. But Gunther got it backward. The more complex an economy becomes, the more hopeless it is for government officials to try to control it by fiat. The Soviet planners, including some brilliant minds, tried every imaginable stratagem to make it work without a system of free market prices within a framework of competition. Over time, they developed many systems of equations that may have helped a little, but no system of equations could cope with the multidimensionality of an economy, something that private prices directed by no one manage with ease. As von Mises said, it is not enough to tell a man not to buy on the cheapest market and not to sell on the dearest market. Once one must establish unambiguous rules for the guidance of conduct in each concrete situation. Von Mises' student Friedrich Hayek added that markets are a discovery system. So there's a lot there. Just want to begin with two kind of points here. The point that the more complex a society gets, the more hopeless it is that a government official could do anything about it. So you can think that socialism works well in a small unit. It works well in your household. For example, going back to that, well, why wouldn't the Soviet Union have any prices if they got rid of private property? Well, think about it. In your home, you don't charge yourself to take something out of the refrigerator. There's no prices in your house. You own everything. It's just, right? You're not there's no need for a price system. It would make no sense. And in the same way, a small family unit kind of acts socialistically, right? It's not really a democracy by any means. And you can imagine a small hunter-gatherer tribe of, say, 20, 25, 30 people. That's small enough to have sort of a socialistic system. But what Mises is talking about, the two key problems with socialism and communism, those things are the lack of prices for information, and then what's called the coordination problem, right? The larger society gets, the coordination doesn't scale in a socialist model. You can't scale it up. You can only scale it down. And so David Friedman has made this point many times. He's had some debates online where some of these new socialist types will come along and say, look, maybe we can't solve the price problem today, but we're getting close with AI and supercomputers that we could have a system where the computer could figure it out and we could get rid of prices and it could allocate resources appropriately. David Friedman says maybe that's mathematically possible or technologically possible, but you still would not solve the scalability of coordination problem. It's insurmountable. And what really bothers me is that the Russian Revolution happened, 1914?
17, 18.
Just a few years later, Mises comes out with an article and a book that just totally destroys the whole thing, and it should have been done. It should have been finished. And yet, nope. Somehow they continue to win the political arguments. Continue to win the arguments.
Despite all that, you've got this Gunther fellow in 1946 saying that the more complex society becomes, the more you need government intervention and centralized control. And you said it exactly right. Hayek emphasized that prices and markets are a discovery system, and that's true. There's no, how did he phrase it? There's no one mind that could possibly hold all the information that goes into the setting of prices as the various actors buy and sell and exchange. But Mises's point was much, much, much stronger. Even if you were somehow to get a supercomputer or an AI that knew all the things that were in the heads of all market participants, and therefore alakazam could generate a price, that doesn't help you solve the socialist calculation problem, because, as you said, your example of a household, if the state owns everything, it does not buy and sell within itself. That wouldn't make any sense. So you don't ever get any prices that can coordinate production. You're just completely blind. And there's no way, absent free markets and private exchange, to fix that problem.
Right. All right. To wrap this up, the author continues. All right. I'm just going to reiterate that von Mises' student, Friedrich Hayek, added that markets are a discovery system. They discover what is scarce, what is available. They communicate it through prices. Communists and many other economists tried to prove von Mises and Hayek wrong, but never got very far. By 1960, the Soviet Union, having abandoned many failed price systems, still had 5 to 9 in operation simultaneously. I mean, if you have one
Chaos.
system, why not have more?
Chaos.
According to different accounts, and probably did not actually know how many it had, none of them worked, despite the expedient of borrowing prices from market economies in Europe and elsewhere. This failure led directly to the fall of communism. You mean it wasn't Reagan? The fall of communism is not a reason for governments of so-called market economies to congratulate themselves. They may not attempt to control all prices, as the Soviet planners did, but they are not allowing prices to tell the economic truth either.
Well said, Mr. Lewis.
Any final thoughts on the beginning of the second lesson here that we delve into?
Only to underscore that I love this lesson 2 here, talking about free prices, because they are a miracle and they are essential for humans to rise out of living in caves. If we don't have them, we lose and die. And to the extent that we inhibit them, we suffer. It's an important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking of advocating for some government policy or other.
Yeah. All right. Well, the next lesson or the next episode in the series, we'll continue on with lesson 2 and see what else we can learn about free prices.
Excellent. So thank you, Tyrone. This was great. Check out the show notes in the video description. We will have some links there to things we've been talking about. And as always, you can learn more, discover more, read more by going to HamanNature.com, Haman. Subscribe to the Substack there, and you'll get articles and a wealth of information. We will catch you next time on Haman Nature.